Yeah, so the first question we have for you today is can you tell us about a time how you came up with the idea for Undock and what the problem you're trying to solve?
Sure. So I came up with the idea for Undock when I was sitting in my office and I was running three companies at the same time. They're all small businesses. And I was on a call, and then I had a call waiting for me on hold. And then there was a literal line of employees waiting outside of my door. And I looked over and I said, this is crazy. There's got to be a better way to manage my own time than this, and also not have people waiting for me all over the place in various queues. So I started out building a hardware product that would tell my employees within the office whether it's a good time to come by my desk and have a chat. So we'll tell them if I'm on the phone, in a meeting, working on a task, or do not disturb busy, or if I'm free for a chat. And I started building that on an Arduino board. And then the idea hit me, this will be even bigger and more powerful if anyone could see that, even if they're not in my office. So I started putting it on the internet. And the first thing, Undock, the first version of Undock, connected to your phone system, your calendar, your conferencing system, and it told anyone that went to your page if you were busy at that moment or free at that moment, so they can either call you, come by, whatever it may be. And that's the genesis of the idea. It evolved a little bit, it matured, and through various iterations, we came up with a meeting product. So it helps you schedule your meetings, host your meetings, and document your meetings. And as we all know now, all of your meetings are remote, so doing all those things has become even more challenging.
Yeah, and you developed the idea for Undock before COVID-19 happened, but now that COVID-19 has occurred, many people are looking for new digital solutions to make their work life easier. So like, what have been some of the impacts that COVID-19 has had on Undock?
Well, that's precisely right. So before the pandemic, I always had speaking broader vision, not just the tactical solution that we're building. I've always had the broader vision that people should be able to work whenever they want and wherever they want. And the reason we don't do that today is because we have this construct. It's a 100-year-old construct that the only way to force accountability and collaboration is to make everyone go in the office, physically co-locate, and then work the same 9 to 5 block to make that easier. But there is software available like Undock that makes collaboration and accountability much, much easier, where you don't need to work the same schedule and you don't need to work in the same office. So when I started Undock, we already had a plan to eventually move to a hybrid situation where we're in the office 2 days per week and we're working remotely 3 days per week. So the product was being built long before COVID for a hybrid situation where people are working remotely. Some people are working in the office, people are working their own schedules. And COVID made that a reality. It advanced what we thought was a trend that would, become more dominant in 5, 7, 10 years, happened today. And if you look at the surveys, they're like 80% of people said they don't want to go back to the office full time. Not that they don't want to go back to the office at all, but they don't want to go back to the office full time. So companies are going to be forced to offer some sort of flexibility in when people work and where they're working. So we were already building the perfect product for the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit just before we released the product. So we didn't have to pivot the product. We didn't have to change the product. It's like, 2029 is now today, and
Yeah.
our product is here.
Wait, so were there any challenges with adjusting to the increased demand due to the acceleration that was like unpredicted?
The only challenge is that I wish we had the product launched the day the shutdown started rolling out across the states, because we still haven't even opened up the product fully to people. We're in a public beta right now, and at the end of next month, we'll be opening up access to more people. But we're in this for the long haul. This situation is not changing anytime soon. I'm thankful and grateful that everything's improving right now. Like New York is one of the better places, and it was one of the worst places previously. But we're not going back to a normal situation where everybody's going to the office. So we still have the opportunity to prove that our product and our product thesis is perfect for the way people will work in the future.
That's awesome. I think my next follow-up question, you mentioned earlier that you went through 3 different product iterations. What's that process like on selling on like an idea and building it through the process and seeing if it's interesting for customers, and how do you go about it?
So that's actually tricky because it's two parts. The fact that it's interesting to a customer may not necessarily be the reason to build it, because the first version of the product, not only did it connect to your phone system, your conferencing system, your calendar, your project management, it had all those things built in, even email, SMS, and regular messaging, like group chat messaging. All of that was built into the original product. And when I talk to people about it, like, yes, of course I want this. When can I use it? But we decided to get really, really focused on the biggest pain point, most frequent pain point, and something that we can solve uniquely with our insights about how to go about solving the problem. And we focused on the meeting aspect of all of that. So sometime down the line, Undock may grow in scope and you'll see us start to roll in some other things, but that's going to be a year or two away before we add anything outside of the meeting. We're hyper focused on solving meetings, which is a big, big, big problem. There's a lot of components to it. So we started with a large scope of our product, extremely large scope, narrowed it down, and then narrowed it down even further. And that's what we're going to market with.
Yeah. And I know that from your LinkedIn, it looks like you started building Undock in 2019. Can you tell us about the process of like forming your team and maybe how that has evolved throughout the year?
Sure. So I was still running the other companies. I was also doing real estate at the time. And I knew I wanted to launch Undock. So I went on a
You're a
hunt
man of
for a
many
name.
talents, Nash.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to call it many talents. I dabble and I explore and try to find things that I have interest in or can excel. But the 2017 is when I tried to find a name for this idea. The first name was the Presence Pod, so just not as catchy. It was a Presence Pod, and then I had like 4 or 5 different ideas for a name, and I went on a domain hunt, and whichever domain I could acquire, because it's really powerful to have like an English word, 6 letters, 1 word domain as a .com. And I was able to acquire undock.com. So once I did that, I said, all right, now I'm going to recruit a little bit of a team. So I talked to my college roommate. We both went to school for computer science. I know he's a smart guy. We started working on it part-time. And we were doing that for about a year part-time without any additional help. Hired 1 or 2 other people along the way. And then last year is when I shut down all of my other businesses and ventures and decided to go full bore at Undock. I recruited a co-founder, VP of engineering, a bunch of engineers, got into an accelerator, completed the accelerator, and then just completed the fundraise here. So I personally took it to the next level pretty much April of last year and started working on it full time.
That's great. How was your process of recruiting software engineers? Because I know it's really hard to get great talent out there, and you've been able to do that.
I've been able to do it now, but I have never worked in, so I went to school for computer science, went into web development. I've never worked in a web development team or any sort of development team. I've never hired a development team. So I hired people and I fired people because I was getting it wrong. And you have to be willing to do it. And that's not something historically that I would do, because I've hired a lot of people. I've given a lot of interviews. This was sort of a new place to hire for people, engineers. I've never hired engineers before. So I hired my college roommate, who's still with us, and then 3 other engineers, and all 3 of them ended up getting fired at various times.
Wow.
So, yeah, you have to do it. And
how was that process like?
I was different for each of them, but ultimately when I recognized that with the minimal amount of resources you have at a startup, you have to get maximum value for whatever it is you're spending. I wasn't even paying a lot, but you have to get maximum value. And when you realize, the second you realize you're not getting that, or you're not going to get that, you have to make a switch. Otherwise, you're going to be languishing for months, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, waiting for said person to catch up. And then your business is falling behind, and the rest of the world is not waiting for that person to figure it out. So one person lasted 5 weeks, one person lasted 5 months, one person lasted a year. But again, once it got to the point where I realized they weren't going to continue to excel or get better, have to bite the bullet and, hire slow, fire fast. That's the axiom there. So, but once I recruited a VP of engineering with much more experience, which that process took me about 4 or 5 months, he started doing the recruiting, and we haven't had to fire any engineers since he took over.
Cross our fingers.
That process. Yes. Although I am working on a new recruit right now, and I got his rubber stamp of approval. So maybe I'll get the engineering hire right once again. And of course, my college roommate, who's brilliant, he's still here. So.
Yeah, I guess relative to hiring a software engineer, we've been able to get a taste of Undock from scheduling this meeting, and the platform is so sleek from the color theme to performance. So like, how was it forming the actual product from, MVP to the current platform that you have?
Once we slimmed it, so I do all the design work up until
it's really nice.
Yeah, thank you. We just hired a designer a couple weeks ago who's much more talented than I am. So you guys wait till you see what we have coming out next. It's just I've always had an eye for design. I'm not a classically trained designer. I don't do it as a profession, but I have an eye for it, and that eye for design spans outside of just web development. Like interior decorate. It doesn't matter what it is. I think I have an eye for design. So I just make things that I think looks good and functional. I choose maybe sometimes a little bit more bold with the colors. A lot of apps that you use is just like, oh, it's all white, or it's not very colorful. So I went for some color pops, and I actually made the color palette, which I haven't seen used anywhere, with the blue, the purple, the gold, and the white, but it seems to be working and people like it. So yeah, that was just picking something that I liked and fine tuning it. It's not really fine-tuned yet. We're working on fine-tuning it now.
Oh, I was going to say, we definitely watched your pitch on Twitch pitch. And I guess one thing that you definitely mentioned a lot was like user experience, and how difficult it was with users in terms of like scheduling meetings. So like, what is your approach to defining user experience, and why is this important for companies?
So I'm also not trained at all in, there's a discipline of user experience. I'm not trained in it, but one thing I do know, or one thing I have learned, is you have to be willing to take a few risks. If you look at most of the conferencing platforms, or most of the note or documentation platforms, and most of the scheduling platforms, there's not an inch of daylight between their user experience, how to schedule, what their calendar or their list of meetings, all of it looks very, very similar. And you have to think like the calendar, we'll take that for example, which we haven't released, and actually just kind of let that out that we're releasing one. Yeah, there you go. It's looked the same since Microsoft and Google digitized the calendar. Google was much later, but it's looked the same, it's functioned the same. Everyone's making slightly different variations of it. But who's to say that first iteration was right in the first place? So you kind of have to just like take a step back and say, okay, this is how it's been done. What about this process actually works? Great. What can we improve? Where can we borrow from? That's why I say it's not even so much just about computer-based design. Like obviously Apple, maybe not as much as of late, but Apple redefined design in so many different ways for the devices that we use every single day. And that's the same thing that we're trying to do with scheduling, documentation, and meetings. So our conferencing platform, every single time somebody comes on our conferencing platform for the first time, people do this. Oh, that's cool. Oh, this is different. I like it. So like that, just knocking out of your brain that you need to copy the competition or what's already existing out there. Here's a perfect example. So my new designer, who's fantastic, he takes a look at our conferencing, compares it with a lot of others, and then he made his first pass at the design. And he says, I looked at Zoom, I looked at Google, and everybody's putting their buttons here for some reason. And I said, okay, but what is that reason? There is none, right? So it's arbitrary. Everyone's putting, let me not say it's arbitrary. This is the first version of something that works. But if you're not willing to take that next step and making something that works that's even better, you're never going to improve or differentiate your product. So that's what if there's something out there that we're trying to build or a feature or functionality, and I'm convinced that the version that's out there from others is not the best version of it, I won't build it. There's features that I'm like, or like group scheduling, and I have a much better version of it coming. We could have built group scheduling out of the gate. There's so many different companies that do various versions of group scheduling. I was convinced it was wrong and slow. Right? So instead of saying, hey, let's copy this company's or copy this, or everybody does it this way, you say, we're not going to build it. We are not going to build it until we figure out a better way. We'll test a better way with users, which we've done now, and we do have a much, much, much better way. So that's how I think about user experience, finding something that's new and better.
Yeah, I think my next question is definitely talking about the accelerator you were able to participate in.
Yes.
What made you decide to participate in an Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator, and what was the benefits from it?
I always had in my plan to join an accelerator. We originally applied to a couple of accelerators, and it made sense to learn about venture scaled businesses. I'd only run small businesses in the past. It made sense to get access to networks and mentorship, which is all valuable if you're willing to
Super
listen.
valuable.
Yeah, if you're willing to listen, like just take it all in, it's great for you. So at the end of last year, we were considering either just going out and raising a small round or going into an accelerator, and 100 times out of 100, looking back, we made the right decision. I'd do it over again. And it was really, the money was not the factor. That was the least of our decision parameters there, but the mentorship and the access to investors and really client networks as well was extremely powerful, and that's why we were able to kick off our fundraising so quickly and wrap that up.
Yeah, and I guess we mentioned earlier we watched your pitch on Twitch pitch, and you did an amazing job. So I was wondering, do you have any advice for founders in terms of pitching their companies to investors and the importance of storytelling? Because I felt like you really told a story during your pitch.
I appreciate that. My advice is to listen to somebody that knows better than you, because that was not my original pitch at all. And I'm still learning how to communicate to your specific audience. In this case, the audience is investors. And the way I talk about my product, even the way I'm talking about the product now, is completely different. I'm like scheduling, hosting, documentation. And that's not the way I actually think about the product. I think about it in an extremely low level technical way. And it'll take years for what we're building behind the scenes to not only come to fruition, but to be in the light. But listen to people that have done it before. Listen to people that have raised money before. Listen to people that have given good presentations before. And like you said, the part about telling a story, try to take a step back from everything you know about your business and trying to convince everybody about everything about your business. Talk a little bit, or think a little bit about why you started it, what problem you're solving, and then tell a story behind that. And that's essentially what I tried to do with the demo day presentation.
I think a question that I have a lot is, you talk about a lot about like product vision and where you're heading with it. Where do you get like these ideas from, and where is like how you settle on such a clear vision for your company?
I do have a North Star, which I don't really talk about too much, but there's a world that I envision for.
Can you talk about it on the podcast right now, or?
I can. I won't. I don't give too much product specifics, but the vision is a world where availability is an afterthought. I mean, everybody lives. No, I'm not saying everybody. Quite a few people, especially in the business professional world, live through their calendar. Their calendar is dictating what they do, when they do it, when they're working, when they're not working, when they're on vacation, what they're working on, who they're meeting with. And there's a better way to manage that. And it extends from beyond the calendar. Like I said, it's phone calls, it's emails, it's messaging. There's a better way to coordinate it. And the way I describe it is that Undock is building the air traffic control for how we meet, talk, connect, and when we do those things. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And so you recently completed a round of funding led by Lightship Capital. Congrats on that.
Thank you very
Can
much.
you take us through the process? Like, why did you decide you were in need of funding, and like, what was the experience like, and so forth?
Okay. The reason we decided to raise funding is speed, so we can accelerate literally everything, product development and growth initiatives. And we feel like the timing for what we're doing is paramount. We weren't necessarily we had time to raise, and we considered raising or waiting a few months to raise, but the timing seemed optimal for us, and the experience was fantastic, and it was not at all what I expected. I budgeted 6 months to fundraise, and I said I'll be prospecting to investors for 4 months of that 6 months, and then once I hit that October 1st deadline, I was going to stop reaching out to investors, try to sort it out between everyone I've spoken to, and raise a $1 million round. What happened, mainly off the strength of the demo day presentation, was kind of a catalyst for everything, is we met over 120 investors in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And most of it, all but 2 or 3 conversations, were inbound. So I didn't reach out to practically anyone. There's a couple people that I had tabbed that I wanted to reach out to that I reached out to. Everything else was inbound. So you can't ask for a better fundraising process than that. And essentially after about 6 weeks, or maybe 5 weeks, the makeup of the round was set. And it was just about figuring out who was going to get in. So the first couple of weeks, it was a little bit shaky. You're not that great at answering questions. You're taking meetings with late stage companies, early stage companies, angel investors. You're still trying to figure it all out, and still even massaging your pitch deck and making changes, which you have to do. But then after that, it was, I'd say the tide really turned in about week 3 and week 4, when all the conversations were, we're interested, let us go figure out how much room do you have left in the round, how much can we participate for. And that part actually extended another 4 or 5 weeks, just figuring out who was participating in the round. But once we got to the point where it's discussion of who's getting in for how much, it actually was, I won't say pleasant, but it was not nerve-wracking, wasn't stressful too much. Which again, that's not the normal fundraising process. That's totally not what I expected. That's why I say it was a pleasurable fundraising process for us.
Wow. That sounds super lucky that that was able to happen for you.
Yeah.
What was like the convincing factors or the characteristics that you were looking for investors who were able to get into the round?
I'll single out Lightship here. When the first time I met them was in that pitch competition, and within the first few minutes of the conversation, I hadn't met them. I had known of them and been following them, but I met them on the competition, and I just said, "Wow, these are genuinely great people, and they are actually interested in what we're building, and more than that, they understood it." So my criteria for the investors that I pursued and the investors that I worked really hard to get into the round was good people. Right? Some of the conversations you had with people, even if they're like, "Oh yeah, this is cool, I like this, whatever," you didn't get the vibe that they were
I feel you.
all about it. And the investors are going to be your family for 5-10 years, so you definitely want those. Even the smallest checks, like you want to have people that you get along with, but then beyond that, you want support for your next phase. And to do that, you have to have alignment in what they see the vision as and what you see the vision. And if they understand that and they get that and they're riding with that, that's when I wanted them wanted an investor in the round. So again, let me caveat that may not be the typical fundraising experience that someone's going to go to, where you can just say, well, your money, like there was investors that I met with and then intentionally didn't follow up with because it felt off. Right.
Yeah.
But, so it wasn't for me about just taking the check. It was about who I was taking the check from. And I'm literally ecstatic about every single investor that got into our round. So
do you think a lot about like value add services that come with the investors too, or?
Honestly, the cliche answer is yes, but I wasn't thinking about that, and I'm actually learning that that's pretty valuable. The reason I wasn't thinking about that is in my career, in my past, the way things have gotten done, I've just mostly done it on my own. I've never been one to, which is again something I'm learning, to ask for assistance or reach out to someone for a connection, or can you do me this favor, or can you put, it was never a thing. But I sat down with, let's say, Lightship, for instance, and they're like, hey, we work for you. What do you need? Do you need a person here? Do you need a connection here? Do you want to review this? Do you want to review that? We have some data over here. Like and that has opened up my eyes to the value add portion. And fortunately, again, the investors, like historic names, they're very professional, very prestigious. So they'll definitely be value add investors. But I wasn't actually thinking about that during the process, if you want the honest answer.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. And I guess going back to your pitch, one thing that really stood out was that you mentioned that you had a pending AI patent, which is very unique. So how important are patents, or how important can they be for founders from your perspective?
It depends. The importance of the patent really matters more in the later stages, when you have the capability of defending it, which is, especially in software, is challenging. But from a investment perspective, and also just culturally inside, when you're actually working on things that no one else has done and no one else has built before, it's really empowering internally. And then again, as you get more capital, as you grow your business, you'll be able to defend some of those things. But yeah, I get really excited. We've already filed one patent. We have 2 more that we're filing before the end of the year. And I hope that we just have a culture of inventing things that don't exist for the world.
This has been an amazing conversation so far. Like, I really appreciate you hopping on the podcast with us and talking with us today. I think a question that I think about a lot too is like, what resources have you been reading, and what have you been taking in, and what information do you help you be a successful founder? Because this is like your first time rodeo leading a tech business.
Yeah, that's a very important question. And I had run business. I can't remember the last time I had a job where I was working for someone. And
Must be an amazing feeling.
it has its ups and downs for sure. But I was just always reluctant, because I know how much effort and energy I'm going to put into anything that I dive into. I can't.
You seem like a really focused guy.
I couldn't fathom working for somebody that's not going to put that same energy and intensity. And I also like working for intelligent people, because it just like wrinkles your brain in all different ways. But I didn't know a thing about venture. Like, it's just like a vague thing off in the distance, especially coming from where I come from. It's nowhere reachable or attainable or in your purview. I just started listening to podcasts. I started reading various blogs. I hopped on Twitter. I started following investors, started following founders of venture back, just listening to how they're, or reading and listening to how they operate. And I learned the game. So there's
you really think it's ways. Like a game and language behind it, like raising venture capital and that kind of thing?
It's 100% a game. The founder of Cisco actually said something that was like, the first rule of any game is knowing you're in one. And that's always been very powerful to me. And yeah, venture capital, venture-backed businesses, tech businesses, it's definitely a game. And I love game theory and game theory mechanics. So working my way through that, it was all like I literally wrote down what my plan would be. I wrote down the stages in which we would raise, the amounts of capital for each round, who would we would.
Well, like in the future too, like past this round of funding.
Oh,
wow.
A year and a half before I even said I was going to talk to an investor in my plan, I put like Accelerator, and I put first round, second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round, exit, potential exit companies. And this is dating back 2 years, potential exit companies, exit valuation. I even have a spreadsheet of the first 83 hires that I think we would need. Whoa. Obviously, that's all going to change. But I even broke that down to like how much equity each person's going to get, and what like a $10 billion exit would mean for that person. So
wow.
In my mind, I hope I'm going to make it happen. that spreadsheet, those first 83 hires out of whatever exit Undock ends up doing, whether it's an acquisition or initial public offering, IPO, they're all going to be millionaires. So, and 1983 was the year I was born, so I like worked backwards from that, but it ended up looking good. So yeah, plan, and try to execute against it. And it is I won't get into the theory behind the product, but part of the theory behind the product is that even scheduling meetings is a cooperative game. If you read about cooperative game theory, you'll see that it's essentially what it is. So yeah, it's a game.
Yeah, so I guess on that note, to close things out, we know that you are a very futuristic person, and you mentioned your North Star earlier. So I guess like what can we expect in terms of the future of Undock?
Because you mentioned the calendar too, and like I appreciate you saying that slip on the podcast. But
yeah, I guess I'll drop a little bit more on it. We actually built the calendar and some other things long before we built the piece of the application that people are using right now. We essentially built that in a couple months as part of our go-to-market strategy. But the product is much bigger than what people have seen and touched. And we will be having an event at the end of October, which will tell a little bit more about the scheduling portion, which we have not revealed all of it. We've dropped hints and whatnot. You can probably surmise what we're doing, or a little bit of what we're doing with the scheduling from the website and some of the stuff on Twitter and whatnot. But at the end of that event, we will make an announcement about what exactly is coming on January 1st, 2021.
Wow, congrats. We don't know what it is, but we know it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, you have an idea, but it's not going to, it's different for sure.
Well, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we definitely learned a lot, and we enjoyed learning more about your journey and all of the advice you were able to give us. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this has been a great episode, honestly. Just all the advice that you have for founders, even thinking about future thinking, like how I'm going to get into Accelerator, all the people I'm going to raise from, all the people you're going to hire. Like I haven't heard a lot of founders who think about things like that far off in the future. And it sounds like you've been very thoughtful for this. I really want to build a great enduring business.
And that's exactly it. And it's about working backwards from it. I'll be super brief here, but I've done this periodically from time to time. And that vision board per se, it used to be last two times I did it was actually a physical vision board. I'm like, I want that, and that, and I want to have that, and I want to live there. And then you just go get it. You just look at it every day and you just go get it. This time I made a digital version of it and a bunch of spreadsheets, and I wrote out like a manifesto for myself. It's like 4 or 5 pages. And it's like, this is what I want to build. This is why it's going to be as big as Google. This is how long it's going to take. And this is what I need to get there. So I even have like I'm going to be wrong ultimately, but it's something to work towards and work against. So you never, I guess I'll say, if you're putting on a sheet that your minimum exit is $1 billion and your expected exit is 10 billion and your hopeful exit is 100 billion, like even if you fall short, like you just have to keep on executing to get as close to that as possible. But if you just say, hey, I'm going to build a business and hope it grows and see where it goes on there, that's a little bit hard. It's too much, at least for me, in the way I work, in my process, is too much ambiguity.
That makes perfect sense.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.